In this part of our tutorial, we're going to introduce the else statement in iOS. So this is a final form of the if statement. We've looked at if, and we've looked at else if, now we'll be looking at else. So what we're going to do is we're going to test a condition to see if it's true, and if it's not, we'll execute some other code regardless of other possible conditions. So this is a chance to test maybe just one or two conditions out of many possible ones, and if those one or two conditions aren't true, then we're going to encompass all other possibilities in this else statement. So we're going to use the example of a computer version of a Monopoly game to test if dice rolls are equal. So if they're equal, we'll have one thing happen, otherwise we'll have another thing happen. So far we've looked at a lot of different variations on if statements. We've seen the basic if statement, we've seen an if statement that tests two conditions, we've seen nested if statements, and we've seen else if statements. Now we're going to look at the final type of if statement, which is going to be the else statement. So this is a statement that encompasses all other possibilities. Whereas each if statement is testing only one condition, or one possibility, the else statement covers all others. And I'll show you what I mean in just a minute here. Let's first come up with some kind of an example. We're going to consider a game. Let's say a game like Monopoly. Everyone's played Monopoly before, and as I think most people should know, one of the rules is that if you roll 3 doubles in a row, so both dice match on all 3 rolls, then you go to jail. So let's say we have a computer version of Monopoly. So each player might have a position. So let's create that right now. So we have an int position. In fact, let's say player position. Okay, and let's say this is some arbitrary square. Let's say we're on square 16. Okay, so this is perhaps where the player is on the board right now. Okay, and then there are the 2 dice. So let's say there is a, let's say the dice are strings. So we have dice 1, and we haven't given it a value yet, and we're going to say there's a dice 2. In fact, it might be easier just to represent these with integers. So each dice is 6-sided, so it can have a value 1 through 6. We're not going to assign a value just yet. In fact, yeah, let's do that. So let's say we have dice 1 is 5, and dice 2 is on a 3. So right now we have the player position being whereabouts the piece is on the board. We have a dice 1 with a value and a dice 2 with a value. And although these should be die, people get a little confused, so we're going to leave them as dice. Okay, so let's say we've already rolled 2 doubles, and now we're about to roll our make our third roll, and we want to see if the 2 dice are the same, because if they are, then we might go to jail. Okay, so this is a computer version, so all it's going to do is it's going to print out the message and then move our piece accordingly. Alright, so let's say we just rolled the dice and now we want to test it. So we have our if statement, and we want to test if dice 1 is equal to dice 2. So if dice 1 equals dice 2, so that means if both numbers on the dice are the same, let's say we roll both 5s or both 6s, then we are going to go to jail. Okay, so then we move the player position. Let's say jail is at square 0. Okay, and perhaps we want to print out a message as well. So let's set the text to say something like, you rolled 3 doubles, go directly to jail. Okay, so now this makes sense. I mean, I'm pretty sure most of us have played the game, so You roll one set of doubles, you'll find another set of doubles, you're alright, and if you roll that third set of doubles, you go to jail. So now this is just testing if that third roll is that doubles, and if it is, then we set our player position to 0 because we're sending our player to jail, and we're going to print out this text. That makes sense? Now, there are many other possible values the dice could take on. So a dice could be 1 through 6, and for both dice to land on the same number is a little uncommon, so we want to encompass all other possibilities with this else statement. And in fact, I'm just going to put it down here. And I'm going to set it up. So the else statement is a little different from the else if statement in that it's not actually testing a condition. So when we had the else if, then we'd still have a condition to test in these brackets. Okay? So we would test this condition, and if that failed, then we would test this condition. However, with the else statement, there is no second test to run. There is only if this fails, then do this. However, the same with the else if applies, that if this is true, so if the first if is true, then we don't do the else. Okay? So in that regard it's the same, but keep in mind that there is no other test to run, and the else encompasses all other possibilities. So let's say else player position equals player position plus dice 1 plus dice 2. Okay, so this is saying, just to recap, that if the two dice are the same, then we're going to go to jail because it's our third doubles. Otherwise, we move our player position to whatever position they're currently at plus the 2 dice value. So very similar to a regular Monopoly game. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this now. So we have the 2 dice being different, and we want to, let's have our text say something along the lines of move your token to position, and then let's have our player position to string. Okay, so although this looks a little complicated, basically all this is doing is, it's taking it's going to send this message saying move your token to position, and then whatever the new player position is going to be. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this. I'm going to run with the iPhone 5S. Oh, I forgot to include the equals there. There we go. Alright. And let's try that again. Run it with the iPhone 5S. And we don't want that up there. While this is loading, here we go. Move your token to position 24. And that's right, because we're at position 16, and we're moving forward 8 squares, because 5 plus 3 is 8, so we should be at position 24. And that's right, so because our 2 dice are not the same. However, if they are the same, let's see what happens here. We'll stop it and rerun it. Again with the iPhone 5S. So in the first instance, we tested this case, it wasn't true, and the else encompasses, again, all other possibilities. So the if statement failed, so the else statement ran, and again there was no test to be ran in the else statement, so it runs regardless of what the outcome would be. So now it says you roll 3 doubles, go directly to jail, and that's true because dice 1 does equal dice 2 in this case. So we execute this code, but not this code, again because this one passes, it's true. So one more thing to note with the else is that it does encompass all other possibilities, whereas for example, if we had the else if again, then this is testing another condition, and there may be the case where there are more than two conditions to test. It may be the case that we test the first condition with an if, we test another condition with an else if, but there might be a third or a fourth or many more conditions that aren't accounted for. This is where the else statement is especially good, because it's basically saying if this fails, if all else fails, if like none of the other conditions could be true, then we'll encompass all other possibilities and it won't matter, we'll just execute this. So I know that's a little confusing, so we're going to take a look at a further example where we combine everything together. So we'll look at an if and an else if, and then finish off with an else in the next video, because this is a little much to take in, and it's good if we can see all three different types of if statement in action at once. But just keep in mind from this, the main takeaway is that the else is A, it's not testing any condition, and B, it's encompassing all other possibilities that are not being tested for here. In this part of our tutorial, we introduce the basic else statement in iOS. So we've looked at if, we've looked at else if, and then we introduce the else statement. So we did this by testing to see if two dice rolls were equal. So this is simulating a game of Monopoly. And if they were, then we go to jail. And if we're not, then we go to the position specified by the roll. So again, in Monopoly, if you roll doubles 3 times in a row, you go to jail. And that's what we were testing. We were on our third roll and testing to see if we got another doubles. So by now, you should understand the difference between if, else if, and else statements, should be an else, and design a case where we would use 1, 2, or all 3 of these different kinds of statements.